Abigail has had quite a life on Days of Our Lives, escaping death and developing dissociative identity disorder. But even though she takes a licking, she keeps on ticking. Who plays Abigail on Days? The daughter of Jack Devereaux and Jennifer Horton, Abigail was born in 1992 and played by a series of child actors including Gillian Clare, who portrayed the girl from 2003-04. In October of 2004, the character was aged into a teenager and Ashley Benson stepped into the role. She stayed for 3 years, departing in 2007. In March of 2011, Kate Monsey joined Days as the newest Abigail, and she made her last appearance in June of 2016. Later that year, Marcy Miller stepped into the role. Although the actress said goodbye to the soap in the fall of 2018, Monsey returned for a brief stint to wrap up her storyline and the following year made additional appearances before coming back on a more permanent basis. However, by August 2020, she was out again and Miller returned to the role in September. What was Abigail's childhood like? As a little girl, Abigail grew up all over the world, and thought her father was dead more than a few times before he actually passed away for real. As a teenager, Abigail had a crush on Max Brady, but when he told her he just wanted to be friends, she went to live with her family in London. Abigail made Austin think they'd slept together. Paul Skipper /JPStudios.com. What happened to Abigail and Ben's baby? When Abigail finally returned in 2011 as an adult, she found herself attracted to Chad DiMera, but he had feelings for her best friend, Melanie Jonas. After an ill-advised attempt to seduce a married Austin, Abby began a relationship with Cameron Davis. But after her father's tragic death, Abigail pushed the doctor away. Abigail rekindled things with Chad, but broke up with him after he ruined Gabby and Nick's wedding and began a fling with his brother, DiMera. When Chad returned to Salem, she slept with him despite being in a relationship with Ben Weston. And when she found herself pregnant, she was dismayed to learn it was Ben's baby because it turned out he was a serial killer. When Ben abducted Abigail, she went into early labor and delivered their son. Chad tried to rescue her, but Ben tied them both to the bed and set it on fire before running off with the infant. Thankfully, Chad and Abigail were rescued and Ben was arrested. She named her son Thomas Jack Devereaux and later learned that Chad is really the boy's father. She and Chad married at the DiMera mansion to finally become a family. Ben tried to kill two birds with one stone. XJ Johnson /JPStudios.com. Unfortunately, Abigail began having hallucinations of Ben and went to desperate extremes to prove that he was really tormenting her again. Chad had her committed to Shady Hills, but continuing to see visions of Ben, she broke out and was later presumed dead in a plane crash. Why did Abigail have multiple personalities? Abigail returned to Salem very much alive months later and spied on her loved ones, including Chad, who had developed a relationship with Gabby Hernandez. After revealing herself, Abby reconciled with Chad, but he admitted that while he wanted to continue to be a family with her and Thomas, he also loved Gabby. But while Chad and Gabby grew closer, Abigail found herself falling for Dario's con and agreed to marry him so he wouldn't be deported. Dario blackmailed Abby into staying in their loveless marriage by threatening Chad, and when that didn't work, he attempted to have Chad killed but Abigail got in the way. Abigail had a bit of an identity crisis. NBC. Thankfully, Abigail recovered from her injuries, and she and Chad were finally remarried. But just as things were looking up for them, Andre was murdered and the DiMera family was thrown into chaos. Although Gabby emerged as a prime suspect, The shocking truth was that it was Abigail wearing a black wig and Gabby's clothing. In addition to developing the alternate personality of Gabby, Abigail also turned into Drive Laura occasionally. While in Gabby mode, Abigail seduced and slept with Stefan DiMera and wound up pregnant. For revenge, Gabby tampered with the paternity test so it would say Stefan was the father, not Chad. Abigail underwent therapy to integrate her personalities, but Gabby continued to torture her and make it appear that she was turning into Gabby again. Shortly after she gave birth to her daughter, Charlotte, Chad sadly had her committed to a mental institution for her own safety, and once she was safely locked up, Gabby poured salt in the wound by confessing to her nasty plot. Abigail was able to use Stefan to get herself out of the institution and, working with Julie, expose Gabby's scheme. Finally reunited with Chad and their children, Abigail became Mrs. DiMera once more and planned to leave Salem to live happily ever after. However, after a little time in Paris, they eventually returned. Abigail returned to Salem to help her family. xjjohnson/jpstudios.com. Why was Abigail hallucinating again? After a year had passed in Salem, Jennifer emerged from her coma and Abigail was working to find out who had really pushed her from the balcony. Eventually, she found evidence that exonerated Eve and got her out of prison and revealed Hope, acting as Princess Gina, as the real culprit. Then Abigail found herself wrapped up in the DiMera family drama as Chad tried to contact Stefano and the villain returned to Salem in Steve Johnson's body. Once Stefano was brought to justice and Chad was freed from Stefano's hypnotic mind control, Abigail thought things could go back to normal but then began having wild hallucinations. First, she saw Chad as Ben holding a necktie, then she saw Jack as Orpheus standing behind Jennifer. Fearing she was losing her sanity again, Abigail was only slightly relieved to learn she had been drugged. With no other alternative, Abigail decided to seek treatment for her hallucinations in Florida, and after saying goodbye to the kids, left with Chad. How are Abigail and Gwen related? Chad was surprised when Abigail showed up while he was hugging Gwen, but he explained the situation and she understood. Abigail admitted she had checked herself out of the hospital because she needed to be at home with her family. Unfortunately, Gwen manipulated Abigail into finding a letter exposing Jack's affair with Kate that she read at Jack and Jennifer's party. Gwen also schemed to make Chad think that Abigail was sleeping with Jake and then slept with Chad herself on New Year's Eve. Chad and Abigail were stunned to learn that Gwen had been the one drugging Abigail and she was out for revenge because they were sisters and Abigail grew up with everything she never had. Chad found himself caught in the middle of a bitter sibling rivalry. xjjohnson/jpstudios.com. Abigail then plotted revenge against Gwen, though at the last minute, Gabby couldn't go through with their plan and Jack asked his daughters to try and get along. That didn't last long, though, as Gwen learned she was pregnant with Chad's baby and Abigail ordered her to get rid of it. After an argument with Gwen that sent her tumbling down the stairs, Abigail felt terrible she'd lost the baby but insisted she'd never pushed her. Feeling overwhelmed, Abigail eventually decided to leave Salem to get her head together. Stay tuned to see what happens next. Ad block test: why